Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In a mysterious underground laboratory, Gary and Steve are discussing their domestic lives when they are interrupted by Wendy, who informs them that Stockholm failed, meaning it's just them in Japan. They laugh, however, the men don't seem concerned because Japan has always been number one, and this American lab has always been the closest runner-up. So they should be able to finish the job without any issues. Meanwhile, 5 college students are preparing for their vacation. We meet Dana, who is trying to forget her affair with a professor, Kurt and his girlfriend Julia, Holden and Marty, who is already smoking by the time he joins the group. They load up a vehicle with all their gear, including Kurt's motorcycle, and set off to spend a few days at a cabin in the woods. On the roof of his house, a suspicious man informs his bosses that the group is on their way. When they are far enough on the road, Julia realizes they have no signal, and Marty explains that's the point, to disconnect from the virtual world and relax at the same time. Gary and Steve begin setting up the computers in the lab's control room. They also meet Daniel, the new security officer for the room, who thinks he's prepared for whatever might happen. Sometime later, the group stops at a gas station, though it appears abandoned, and they can't tell if the gas pumps work. Holden goes inside the building to investigate and finds a collection of very creepy stuff, only to be startled by Mirai, the man who knows about the cabin they're talking about, explaining that he's seen many owners come and go. He gives them directions on how to get to the place, pointing out that the fuel they have is enough to get there, but getting back is their problem. He also insults Julia, so Kurt wants to hit him for it, but Holden quickly holds him back, and the group decides to leave before things get ugly. After a few more miles of driving, the group passes through a tunnel under a mountain, which is the only way to reach these woods since there's a wide canyon around. As the vehicle passes, a bird flies very close, suddenly colliding with an invisible barrier, revealing that this area is surrounded by a force field. Minutes later, the group arrives at the cabin and begins bringing their stuff in. Holden finds an extremely scary painting in his room and sets it aside, only to discover he can see Dana's room through the mirror. When Holden realizes he can see Dana changing clothes, he immediately yells at her to stop and calls everyone to show them the mirror. After some jokes, Holden offers Dana to switch rooms, which Dana greatly appreciates. Then she realizes she can also see Holden changing clothes, so she puts the painting back in its place. She finds it quite creepy too and decides to cover it with a blanket. Back at the laboratory, they are recording what's happening inside the cabin. They discuss an impending scenario adjustment and somehow have access to the students' blood tests, indicating that the chemicals they planted in Julia's hair dye are working very well and have increased her libido. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a call from Mirai, who warns them that the students are on their way and begins to preach about cleansing for the greater good. He takes this so seriously that Gary and Steve can only laugh as the group of friends spends the day at the lake. Gary and Steve start making bets on what the students will choose at the cabin. Daniel finds all this quite severe, but Wendy points out they need to relax a bit to make this very difficult job easier. When Daniel wonders if the higher-ups know about this, Steve explains that their bosses don't care as long as the job gets done. Daniel also finds it unfair to bet on an outcome that is controlled by them, but Steve and Gary say the system isn't like that. The youth will be guided to the destination, but the final choice is theirs to make. They choose to ignore or not the warnings of Mirai, who is also there for the system, and only if they choose to proceed to the place anyway is when they might be punished. As night falls, the group of friends plays Truth or Dare. Julia is dared to kiss a wolf's head hanging on the wall, and she does so very well, acting provocatively, which is unusual for her. Then, Dana chooses Dare, and at that moment, a door in the floor opens behind them, something courtesy of the people from the laboratory. The young people foolishly attribute this to the wind and ignorantly decide that Dana's dare is to go down there. When she does, she discovers it's full of scary objects, like an old piano and creepy dolls. Suddenly, the image of a girl scares Dana, and she screams, making the others come down too. Marty lights a lamp, and they discover even more scary things, which makes Marty think they shouldn't stay down there, especially when he hears a voice whispering to him. The others ignore him and start messing around with things like a music box with a ballerina and a strange orb, but their search is interrupted by Dana, who found a diary. She reads passages explaining that the first family that owned this house was tortured by the father, and the daughter found a book with some prayers that would bring good spirits to them. There are a few lines in Latin on the page, and Marty asks Dana not to read them, but Dana does so anyway. This causes the corpses of the family to come back to life, and the people in the lab celebrate that the maintenance staff won the bet. It turns out their bet was based on which monster would attack the students depending on the item they were playing with. Daniel still can't believe that gods and magic are real, and Steve is disappointed they didn't get to see a merman, as it's never chosen. Then, he and Gary check on the screens showing the same work being done all over the world. All the other countries have failed except Japan. In a Japanese school, young girls are dealing with a scary ghost. Later, the group of friends goes upstairs, and Kurt and Julia continue to behave strangely. Kurt keeps drinking and making crude remarks, while Julia dances provocatively and playfully flirts with Marty. Since the other three are no longer in the mood, Kurt and Julia leave to have some privacy in the woods. Marty asks Dana if she doesn't notice that their friends are acting strange, and he confesses he feels like there are some puppeteers behind all this. Dana tells him it's just the side effects of what he's smoking, so Marty decides to go to his room and rest. Dana joins Holden on the couch, and they end up kissing. Meanwhile, Kurt is trying to convince Julia to do things in the forest, but Julia doesn't want to undress because it's cold. The people in the lab are disappointed because they want to see some action, so they release pheromones to change Julia's mind. As the couple starts to get in the mood, the technicians also turn on a special light to create a romantic spot on the grass. Kurt and Julia lie down and start getting busy, making Julia look good on camera. Daniel wonders if this is going too far, but Steve explains they need to keep the client satisfied. Suddenly, a zombie appears and stabs Julia's hand. Startled, she backs away, and Kurt intervenes to defend her, but the zombie stabs him in the shoulder. Kurt pushes him away and removes the blade from his shoulder, only to see a second zombie approaching. This one uses a chain to knock him down and then captures Julia. The first zombie grabs Kurt to make him watch as the entire zombie family kills Julia with a rusty saw. In the lab, Steve and Gary say a prayer, indicating Julia's death as an offering, and Steve pulls a lever to make Julia's blood fall into a mysterious contraption. At the cabin, Marty hears the voice again and decides to go for a walk. First, he relieves himself and notices there are no stars in the sky. One of the zombies suddenly appears and starts slowly approaching him, but at that moment, Kurt appears, pushes the zombie away, and takes Marty back into the house. Kurt then tells everyone that Julia is dead and they need to get out. Against Marty's warnings, Dana opens the door and finds another zombie that throws Julia's head at her. Dana screams as Kurt and Holden rush to lock the door, keeping the zombie outside. Kurt emphasizes the importance of sticking together for safety and that they need to barricade all windows and doors. This could complicate the lab's work, so the technicians release a disorienting gas that makes Kurt change his mind, and he announces they should split up to cover more ground. Each student rushes to their room, and the technicians lock their doors. Marty hurries to close the window and accidentally knocks over a lamp, revealing a hidden camera. Steve contacts the chemistry lab to get something to make him forget, but Gary stops him. He stays there because there's already a zombie on the way. As Marty wonders if this is a reality show, he leans his body against the window, and the zombie breaks the glass to grab him and throw him out. They exchange a few blows, but the zombie stabs Marty and drags him into the forest. Then, the technicians pull the lever again, and it's shown that Marty's blood is sent to a stone sculpture. The ground under the cabin begins to shake, and a zombie breaks through Dana's window. She starts crying for help, and Holden breaks the mirror between their rooms to bring her into his. There's another zombie trying to get in there too, and when Holden moves the bed to block the attack, Dana discovers another basement door. She uses a lamp to check if it's safe, and when Kurt shows up to join them, Holden says he can't open the door, so Kurt must hide in the basement. Holden and Dana enter the new basement and discover a series of gruesome tools, making Dana realize this is the room where the father killed the family. Suddenly, the basement door opens, and a zombie appears, using the chain to capture Holden. Dana immediately grabs him too and pulls him back into the basement before grabbing any tools she can find to strike the zombie until it can't move anymore. Gary activates a switch that makes the blade in Dana's hand electrocute her, causing her to drop it so she can't defend herself anymore. Suddenly, another door opens, and Kurt appears from an adjacent room in the basement, telling Holden and Dana he found a way out. They follow a dark hallway until they reach a door that leads them outside. The trio escapes in the vehicle without noticing the bloody handprint on the door. Meanwhile, the girls at the Japanese school manage to exorcise the ghost, meaning the American team is the only one standing. Wendy calls Steve and Gary to reprimand them for being so cocky about all this and reminds them to take it seriously, as they can't allow the elders to rise. At that moment, Gary realizes the vehicle is about to reach the tunnel, which shouldn't be open. Gary rushes to check what's preventing the demolition team from bringing down the tunnel and discovers there was a glitch in the system. When the vehicle enters the tunnel, Gary fixes the wires and finally brings the tunnel down. Kurt reacts quickly and reverses to escape before they're crushed. The only way out would be to jump the chasm, but they don't have ropes. Kurt decides to try jumping with his motorcycle, as he's made some big jumps before. Unfortunately, when Kurt jumps, he hits the invisible wall and is electrocuted before falling into the chasm. Dana realizes Marty was right about someone pulling the strings behind the scenes, and the technicians use Kurt's blood to fill another stone sculpture. Holden and Dana return to the vehicle and drive back to the cabin because Holden thinks they might find a road behind it. Their words are suddenly interrupted by a blade coming from behind and hitting Holden, killing him instantly. Dana screams when she sees there's a zombie on the VR, which is now veering off the road and falling into the lake. The zombie tries to grab Dana, but she just swims away, while the technicians in the lab celebrate with a drink. Daniel doesn't understand why they're happy, considering Dana is alive, but Steve explains that the sacrifice of the untouched is optional, as long as it's done last and she suffers first. As Dana reaches the pier and is being attacked by a zombie, the lab employees throw a party. The demolition team remains on the defensive and says the glitch was caused by a power router upstairs, which Gary thinks doesn't make sense. Then, the phone connected to the people upstairs starts ringing, and Steve answers the call to find out that one of the sacrifices is still alive, so the ritual wasn't completed. The zombie on the pier is about to kill Dana when Marty appears to help her. The two beat the zombie to make it fall into the lake, and then they flee, aware that the zombies are still following them. Marty makes Dana enter one of the pits, where the zombie that got Marty is lying on the ground in pieces after Marty took care of him with a trident. The place doesn't look like a pit, it's more like a metal box with an electrical panel. Marty activates it and opens a door in the floor leading them to a box-like elevator. The two enter it, and the elevator starts moving in all directions. When it stops for a few seconds, a werewolf crashes against the glass trying to reach them. Then, the elevator moves again, and each time it stops, Marty and Dana encounter a new monster. They see a sinister-faced ballerina possessing multiple mouths within each other, and a humanoid with saws embedded in its head holding the strange ball they saw earlier in the cabin. Dana begins to correlate the monsters with the objects they had seen in the basement and realizes that the handlers can choose what will kill them. There are hundreds of monsters down there, trapped in the boxes, waiting for their turn to be released for the show as she has a breakdown. The technicians panic as they discuss how to proceed. They track down the couple and realize that what Marty smokes renders him immune to their actions. When the elevator finally stops, the doors open to reveal a guard who wants to take Dana. However, the zombie arm on the floor moves and grabs the guy, giving Marty and Dana the chance to push him against the wall and knock him out. Then, they grab the zombie's knife and the guard's gun before descending down a corridor, where a female voice begins to explain their part in something bigger, saying their duty is to appease the being below that place, something ancient, and they must submit themselves as sacrifices so the being doesn't escape. At that moment, more guards appear, so Dana and Marty run to hide inside a small control room. Dana notices the panel and presses the button, causing all the monsters to escape from their cages. Now, chaos ensues in the building as the monsters kill anyone they encounter in their path, from guards to scientists. The power goes out in the main control room, and something tries to break down the door, while Marty and Dana are suddenly surprised by a bat dragon. They flee, dodging or shooting at the monsters trying to grab them, and enter a hole in the wall leading to a hidden tunnel in the control room. Gary and Wendy are trying to open the emergency door to their escape tunnel. Daniel is killed by the scarecrows, but before dying, he activates a grenade that knocks Steve to the ground. He's disappointed to see that the Triton is actually incredibly ugly before the monster kills him, while giant tentacles burst through the ceiling and grab Wendy. Gary finally manages to open the emergency door, and he runs through the hidden tunnel, where he accidentally gets stabbed by Dana with the knife. Before dying, Gary asks Dana to kill Marty. After that, Marty hands the gun to Dana, and the two descend through the tunnel to find a chamber with 5 huge stone sculptures, 4 of which are filled with blood. Dana realizes that each sculpture represents a member of the group of friends, and that all of this is a sacrifice ritual. Marty wonders why they don't just kill them quickly and directly, and Dana points out that they probably want to see them punished. Suddenly, the female voice from before confirms they were punished for being young, and the director appears explaining that this ritual was created to appease the ancients. They are giant evil gods sleeping beneath the laboratory, and they will awaken to destroy the Earth if the ritual isn't completed. There are 8 minutes left before sunrise, so Marty must die for the others to survive. Marty doesn't want the world to live at the expense of his friends' deaths, but Dana understands the greater good and points the gun at Marty while apologizing. At that moment, a werewolf appears behind Dana, and instead of warning her, Marty also apologizes. The werewolf attacks Dana, causing her to drop the gun. The director and Marty try to grab it at the same time, and Marty wins by pushing the director away. Then, he shoots the werewolf, making it flee. The director goes after Marty, and a fight ensues, while a zombie with an axe appears in the room. Dana sees and warns Marty, so when the zombie raises the axe, Marty uses the director as a shield, and she is killed. Marty kicks them off the platform, and since the director and the zombie are not part of the ritual, the ground trembles for a few seconds, announcing the imminent awakening of the ancients. As they await the end, Marty and Dana apologize to each other while sharing a last cigarette. Suddenly, a giant arm emerges from the ground, destroying the laboratory and the cabin, and the remainder of the Earth is about to be destroyed.